Chapter 16. That afternoon, I go back to the dormitory while everyone else spends time with their families and find Al sitting on his bed, staring at the space on the wall where the chalkboard usually is. Ford took it down yesterday so we could calculate our stage 1 rankings. There you are, I say. Your parents were looking for you. Did they find you? He shakes his head. I sit down next to him on the bed. My leg is barely half the width of his, even now that it's more muscular than it was. He wears black shorts. His knee is purple-blue with a bruise and crossed with a scar. You didn't want to see them? I say. Didn't want them to ask how I was doing, he said. I'd have to tell them, and they would know if I was lying. Well, I struggled to come up with something to say. What's wrong with how you're doing? Al laughs harshly. I've lost every fight since the one with Will. I'm not doing very well. By choice, though. Couldn't you tell them that too? He shakes his head. Dad always wanted me to come here. I mean, they said they wanted me to stay in Candor, but that's only because that's what they're supposed to say. They've always admired the Dauntless, both of them. They wouldn't understand if I tried to explain it to them. Oh, I tap my finger against my knee. Then I look at him. Is that why you chose Dauntless? Because of your parents? Al shakes his head. No, I guess it was because I think it's important to protect people, to stand up for people, like you did for me. He smiles at me. That's what the Dauntless are supposed to do, right? That's what courage is, not hurting people for no reason. I remember what Ford told me, that teamwork used to be a Dauntless priority. What were the Dauntless like when it was? What would I have learned if I'd been here when my mother was Dauntless? Maybe I wouldn't have broken Molly's nose or threatened Will's sister. I feel a pang of guilt. Maybe it would be better once initiation is over. Too bad I might come in last, Al says. I guess we'll see tonight. We sit side by side for a while. It's better to be here in silence than in the pit watching everyone laugh at their families. My father used to say that sometimes the best way to help someone is to just be near them. I feel good when I do something I know he would be proud of. Like it makes up for all the things I've done that he wouldn't be proud of. I feel braver when I'm around you, he says. Like I could actually fit in here, the same way you do. I am about to respond when he slides his arm across my shoulders. Suddenly, I freeze, my cheeks hot. I didn't want to be right about Al's feelings for me, but I was. I do not lean into him. Instead, I sit forward so his arm falls away. Then I squeeze my hands together in my lap. Tris, he says. His voice sounds strained. I glance at him. His face is as red as mine feels, but he's not crying. He just looks embarrassed. Sorry, he says. I wasn't trying to. Sorry. I wish I could tell him not to take it personally. I could tell him that my parents rarely held hands, even in our own home, so I have to train myself to pull away from all the gestures of affection because they raised me to take them seriously. Maybe if I told him that, there wouldn't be a layer of hurt beneath his flush of embarrassment. But of course, it is personal. He is my friend, and that is all. What is more personal than that? I breathe in. When I breathe out, I make myself smile. Sorry about what? I ask, trying to sound casual. I brush off my jeans, though there isn't anything on them, and stand up. I should go, I say. He nods and doesn't look at me. You going to be okay? I say. I mean, because of your parents, not because... I let my voice trail off. I didn't know what I would say if I didn't. Oh, yeah. He nods again, a little too vigorously. We'll see you later, Tris. I try not to walk out of the room too fast. When the dormitory door closes behind me, I touch my hand to my forehead and grin a little. Awkwardness aside, it is nice to be liked. Discussing our family visits would be too painful, so our final rankings for stage 1 are all we can talk about that night. Every time someone near me brings it up, I stare at some point across the room and ignore them. My rank can't be as bad as it used to be, especially after I beat Molly, but it might not be as good enough to get me into the top 10 at the end of initiation, especially when the Dauntless-born initiates are factored in. At dinner, I sit with Christina, Will, and Al at the table in the corner. We are uncomfortably close to Peter, Drew, and Molly, who are the next table over. When conversation at our table reaches a lull, I hear every word they say. They are speculating about the ranks. What a surprise. You weren't allowed to have pets? Christina demands, smacking the table with her palm. Why not? Because they're illogical, Will says matter-of-factly. What is the point of providing food and shelter for an animal that just soils your furniture and makes your home smell bad and ultimately dies? Al and I meet eyes like we usually do when Will and Christina start to fight, but this time, the second our eyes meet, we both look away. I hope this awkwardness between us doesn't last long. I want my friend back. The point is, Christina's voice trails off and she tilts her head. Well, they're fun to have. I had a bulldog named Chunker. One time we left a whole roasted chicken on the counter to cool, and while my mother went to the bathroom, he pulled it down off the counter and ate it, bones, skin, and all. We laughed so hard. Yes, that certainly changes my mind. Of course, I want to live with an animal that eats all my food and destroys my kitchen, Will shakes his head. Why don't you just get a dog after initiation if you're feeling that nostalgic? Because Christina's smile fades and she pokes at her potato with her fork. Dogs are sort of ruined for me after the aptitude test. We exchange looks. We all know that we're not supposed to talk about the test, not even now that we have chosen, but for them that rule must not be as serious as it is for me. My heart jumps unsteadily in my chest. For me, that rule is protection. It keeps me from having to lie to my friends about my results. Every time I think the word divergent, I hear Tori's warning and my mother's warning. Don't tell anyone. Dangerous. You mean killing the dog, right? Asks Will. I almost forgot. This was the aptitude test, the Dauntless. Those with an aptitude test for Dauntless picked up the knife in the simulation and stabbed the dog when it attacked. No wonder Christina doesn't want a pet dog anymore. I tug my sleeves over my wrist and twist my fingers together. Yeah, she says. I mean, you guys all had to do that too, right? She looks first at Al and then me. Her dark eyes narrow and she says, You didn't? You're hiding something, she says. You're fidgeting. What? In candor, says Al, nudging me with his shoulder. There, that feels normal. We learn to read body language, so we know when someone is lying or keeping something from us. Oh, I scratch the back of my neck. Well, see, there it is again, she says, pointing at my hand. I feel like I'm swallowing my heartbeat. How can I lie about my results if they can tell when I'm lying? I'll have to control my body language. I drop my hands and clasp my hands in my lap. Is that what an honest person does? I don't have to lie about the dog, at least. No, I didn't kill the dog. How did you get into Dauntless without using the knife? Will says, narrowing his eyes at me. I look him in the eye and say evenly, I didn't. I got abnegation. It is half true. Tori reported my results as abnegation so that it was in the system. Anyone who has access to scores would be able to see it. I keep my eyes on his for a few seconds. Shifting them away might be suspicious. Then I shrug and stab a piece of meat with my fork. I hope they believe me. They have to believe me. But you chose Dauntless anyways, Christina says. Why? I told you, I say, smirking. It was the food. She laughs. Did you guys know that Triss has never seen a hamburger before she came here? She launches into the story of our first day, and my body relaxes, but I still feel heavy. I should not lie to my friends. It creates barriers between us, and we already have more than I want. Christina taking the flag, me rejecting Al. After dinner, we go back to the dormitory, and it's hard for me to not sprint, knowing about the rankings will be up when I get there. I want to get it over with. At the door to the dormitory, Drew shoves me into the wall to get past me. My shoulder scrapes on the stone, but I keep walking. I'm too short to see over the crowd of initiates standing near the back of the room, but when I find a space between heads to look through, I see that Blackboard is on the ground, leaning against Four's legs, facing away from us. He stands with a piece of chalk in one hand. For those of you who just came in, I'm explaining how the ranks are determined, he says. After the first rounds of fights, we rank you according to your skill level. The number of points you earn depends on your skill level and the skill level of the person you beat. You earn more points for improving and more points for beating someone of a high skill level. I don't reward preying on the weak. That is cowardice. I think his eyes linger on Peter at that last line, but they move quickly enough that I'm not sure. If you have a high rank, you lose points for losing to a low-ranked opponent. Maya lets out an unpleasant noise, like a snort or a grumble. Stage 2 of training is weighed more heavily than Stage 1 because it is more closely tied to overcoming cowardice, he says. That said, it is extremely difficult to rank high at the end of initiation if you rank low in Stage 1. I shift from one foot to the other, trying to get a good look at him. When I finally do, I look away. His eyes are already on me, probably drawn by my nervous movement. We will announce the cuts tomorrow, Four says. The fact that you are transfers and the Dauntless-born initiates are not will not be taken into consideration. 4 of you could be factionless and none of them, or 4 of them could be factionless and none of you, or any combination thereof. That said, here are your ranks. He hangs the board on the hooks and steps back so we can see the rankings. First, Edward. Second, Peter. Third, Will. 4, Christina. 5, Molly. 6, Triss. Sixth? I can't be in sixth. Beating Molly must have boosted my rank more than I thought it would. And losing to me seems to have lowered hers. I skip to the bottom of the list. 7th, Drew. 8th, Al. 9th, Mira. Al isn't dead last, but unless the Dauntless Born Initiates completely failed their version of Stage 1 of initiation, he is factionless. I glance at Christina. She tilts her head and frowns at the board. She isn't the only one. The quiet in the room is uneasy, like it's rocking back and forth on the ledge. Then it falls. What? Demands Molly. She points at Christina. I beat her. I beat her in minutes, and she's ranked above me? Yeah, Christina says, crossing her arms. She wears a smug smile. And? If you intend to secure yourself a high rank, I suggest you don't make a habit of losing to low-ranked opponents. Low-ranked opponents, says 4, his voice cutting through the mutters and grumbles of the other initiates. He pocketed the chalk and walks past me without glancing in my direction. The words sting a little, reminding me that I am the low-ranked opponent he's referring to. Apparently, they remind Molly too. You, she says, focusing her narrowed eyes on me. You are going to pay for this. I expect her to lunge at me or hit me, but she just turns on her heel and stalks out of the dormitory, and that is worse. If she had exploded with anger, it would have been spent quickly, after a punch or two. Leaving means she wants to plan something. Leaving means I have to be on my guard.